So I was a wine snob, helping pick out expensive bottles of wine, crazy ass shit. So then fast forward, I'm in this hotel drinking myself to death. And I remember like exclaiming to myself or to whoever else imaginary in the room, like, whoever invented the wine box, the box of wine, was brilliant. Because all I had to do was roll over in bed, take the spigot, and I didn't even have to get it into a glass. I just had to pour it into my mouth. And if I didn't have to get up to go to the bathroom, I didn't have to get out of the bed at all. It was like the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I remember exclaiming to myself, this is so cool. And at some point I started laughing, and it's almost surreal, like looking down at myself like, all right, John, enough's enough, man. You're sitting here talking to yourself, you're ready to high five the inventor of the box of wine.
Yeah, if I look like I just snorted some Coke or something, I decided like 5 minutes before this to go ahead and have some hot wings. So that was not a smart choice. What is your name?
Hi, this is John Meyer.
I want to start with, what is addiction?
Addiction for me, what I have found in myself in the many years of the path or journey that I've been on is I have I just kind of qualify as disease of more, man. There's not enough booze or drugs that satisfy. And then I simply do whack-a-mole. I move to food, move to sex, love, work is horrible for me. I just keep filling a void. And if it wasn't for, therapists like you, and I know it's not about self-plugging, Kenny, but you're one of the first that helped me start to understand I just can't keep filling a hole. So that, to me, is a disease of more, is what addiction is to me.
From here, let's just have you go ahead and kind of share your story.
Thank you for the opportunity. I had a real problem. It's funny for whoever's listening to this. I first heard Kenny and about Kenny's group on a radio pitch on a Sunday night, I believe. I think it was about addiction and drugs, and it was yet another weekend that I was coming off of a horrible hangover, and it just happened to be one of those what I call God shots. It was just one of those things at the right time, at the right moment that I needed to hear it. But it was at a point that I finally wrote down a phone number, and I remember calling. It probably was the next day. I think it was you that actually picked up the phone. I didn't know at the time that you I just thought you were a therapist. I didn't realize you were a therapist that understood it because you had some history, right? You were relating to it because you had been there in some capacities. And that was kind of the first time in my life that I finally spoke to someone about it, had someone help me feel better, help me realize I wasn't alone. Didn't tell me to just go to a meeting, go to AA, or, just say, hey, if you just want to learn more, come on in. For me, my drinking problems at the time, not really knowing to put a label on it or wanting to put a label on it, but knowing that the binging was just at a point that realizing that I was hanging out with people that drank and used a lot like me, but I was doing it a little more than everyone else, and often more than everyone else, and using it again the next day more than anyone else, or often alone. I just remember, I think it was the first time I ever reached out for help to talk to anyone about it. And before this, I had already been through a marriage. I had a wife that she was great. I knew I had a drinking problem. I think that was it. I just thought I drank too much. And I better go do something or talk to some people about this. And I remember at that point, I better just get ahead of this. I'll just learn how to drink better. And I went to AA, found everything wrong about it. And that I was looking for I looked in this room. It was just a bunch of old guys drinking coffee, and went running out of that meeting thinking I'll never go back to that. And that wasn't for me. Fast forward to 10 years to the story I just gave, then realizing that after, I think it was a couple of days later after I made that phone call, starting to realize that I started affecting my professional life, my personal life was about not wanting to come to terms with my drinking, my using, the way I'd gone about blaming everyone but myself. I also, at that time in my professional life, began realizing that I surrounded myself really well with my alcoholic tendencies. I created a business around other drinkers, even found clients that like to drink. I affected uh, my son who was growing up with a father that was rationalizing being away. Um, Now I didn't realize I was doing that. Again, I was rationalizing that I was putting food on the table. I was creating a legacy for him and through a business I was growing, all the business trips, coming home on the weekends to spend time with him. But I also knew that my monster in the back of my head and the using was growing. I think I just started realizing it wasn't going to be enough. And it kind of goes back to that disease of more that I knew was starting to grow, grow, and grow. That beautiful wife I had, that mother of this great child I had, my son's now coming into junior high. I was coming home from business meetings and dinners and wanting to dine in clients. So I always had sort of a hook. It was coming home from school board meetings because, again, I was less and less time away from her because she didn't drink. Part of the reason I married her, because I knew she was like that. It was I think I even married her thinking that she was going to help me stay the straight and narrow. But she finally gave me the ultimatum. Finally, there was always sort of building up to it, but she just said, "You're an alcoholic." And my ego just said, "Fine, I'm not an alcoholic. I'll show you." And it kind of get to a point that I can control this thing. And I think like every alcoholic, as I've come to learn, is that we're control freaks. I can control my drinking. I can control everything in my little world. And I just said, I can stop this. And for some reason I did. But all I did was I moved to gaining 40 pounds. I ate horribly. I picked up cigars and smoked horribly. I went from 50 to 60-hour work weeks to 70 to 80. My business took off. I got my ego into making crazy money and spending horribly. I just went on tirades. I became the biggest asshole to even, not just to my wife, because I showed her, but to loved ones, to business partners. I just became the biggest dick. And I just look back on it. It was just terrible. And I did it. I stayed abstinent from alcohol for, I think, almost 2 years. And it was just such a terrible time of my life. But I didn't drink. And I showed her. And she just finally had enough. She just said, "Drink if you fucking want." And she was done. It was probably a matter of weeks when we got separated until I was on a bender of all benders. But this time it wasn't just drinking like I did. I took time off work. Well, the booze took time off work, and then it went into cocaine and went into that disease of more, which I didn't even realize. But it just had to prolong. It just got crazy. I stabilized enough. I got myself back up, but just to get my feet back or my legs back underneath me. And then I sort of found an equilibrium between balancing it out with maintaining the booze and going into a period to sort of maintain my businesses and so forth. But I was lost it all, including my son. But the divorce went through. It was a horrible year, and I kept drinking. And then instead of finding help, I found the love and understanding of my drinking buddy. So careful what you wish for. So I just thought, this is the cool thing. I found a love interest in someone that who would understand me, and we'd space it out together. And I found someone who wanted to travel with me, and someone who had the same interests. And And it was kind of cool. I drank less and I was able to make work again, and did some different things. And it was kind of fun for about 2 years, but then reality kind of came back in that the drinking was still there. The excessiveness was still there. And I got remarried. I got married to the wife number two, who loved all the excessiveness, loved the spending, loved the drinking. So I just found a female me, and I just made a bigger mess. And don't marry your drinking buddy. I just had someone who spent it as fast as I made it as well. So now I had wife number one, who I who took me to court and made sure that she was taken care of. And I didn't care. I just always had this disease of more. I'll just make more. And I was taking care of my son, and now I was taking care of wife number two and spending as much as I could and using as much as I could to keep up with it all. And as the story can go, as I was listening to this, who's been there, it's all just building up to all crash all the way down. And it did. And that's basically where, as I got separated from wife number two, and I couldn't keep all the balls in the air. I ended up back at my parents'. There was an intervention and came to at my parents' house, which, with the relationship I had with my father, I couldn't imagine ever waking up after a bender at the house I grew up at, in my old bedroom, and with my father standing over me, and then realizing I was going to need help. So I did some one-on-one again. The best thing that I got was my first introduction to group. And I first time I ever got into a group therapy safely with a small group of men. And I tried AA off and on. Part of my homework, I got introduced to NA and some other programs just so I could see what else was out there. All of that was what I would later learn in the sobriety that I have now is a foundation of understanding, which I fully embrace now. That is extremely helpful. But that those first men, it's funny. I just reached out to a couple of them, just because I have such a fondness of those first men that embraced me, who for the first time, who I am or who I was, and I still am. That guy that wanted what some of them have. And some of them, I learned that there's integrity in some of those other men, and that those building blocks, those foundations were things that I would take with me. Although I would relapse and relapse and relapse, I still would hold on to some of those elements. And if anyone hears this recording, don't fucking give up, man, because those relapses, even if you just go a couple of days and go back out, you can always come back in. And if you learn something in those couple of days, or just hear from me or anyone else, those things stick, and you're going to remember that. You don't have to give up. I've been called a retread. I've been called all kinds of fucking labels. The fucking labels are just fucking labels. Anyone that has any salt in this program doesn't give a shit about labels. And you're going to find that you get to keep those days. So today I have 317 days of sobriety. I had a real good relapse the turn of last year at the holidays after going over 500 days of sobriety that I really got bummed out about. I had a year plus, and I thought that was it. After going to rehab and doing serious rehab down in Southern California, ended up getting on some opioids with an injury that then became a gateway back into fucking drinking. And I should have seen it. And this last relapse was the most educational. Those last 10 and a half months has been the best sobriety I've ever had, with my higher power, who I call God, and with people in my program, including Kenny, and the friends that were still there, that were waiting for me when I came back in. Their help, I don't think I have to go back out. I don't have the obsession anymore, but it's still going to be there if I don't keep doing the work. But my point being is, I just need to stay close to the program for the rest of my life. And, I'm an older guy that have a lot of younger guys that I'm involved with right now. I'm accountability with, got a couple sponsees just because I like reading the book and every day. I soak up something every day. The last thing I'll close with is I left my son. He's one of the biggest bridges I burnt. When I went and married a second wife, I left him in ashes, if you will. You can just imagine I was a mess. I was partying all the time. I was not very strong for him and spending a little bit of time with him here and there. He basically just blocked me. So the last time when I was up in Seattle, I hadn't talked to him for probably a year and a half at that point. I got down to rehab in Orange County. I let him know, I let my family know, where I was. They have something called like a visitation time for family to come visit. And even at COVID, they let you visit via Zoom. I was the only guy in rehab that never had anyone showing up. So I just realized that, what I had done and that I'm going to have to go through these steps and that these steps are real and that I'm going to have to make amends, and realizing that I may never be able to have that relationship. I'll still have to own it. Long story short is I took time. I worked with sponsors. I worked with other people in the program, and I safely worked through some of those steps, through my ex, and my brother and other people that, weren't talking to me, including my son. I had to safely send them letters and, own many of these aspects. But I'll just cut to the chase. I was able to work this safely for them. And even myself. Son accepted those amends. I was able to then ultimately meet with him in Sacramento. And we worked it through. And then over time, we ended up being unblocked, talking regularly. And he decided to go back to college, and he wanted to go to college in Southern California. And he safely came down here. Now he wants to go back and finish his degree, and decided he could do it here with me, and we could rebuild our relationship, living together and not necessarily make up time, but to build time together now while he's finishing up his stuff. And it's just been amazing with this program and This Life Can Still Give You at a time that I just assumed that would never happen again. So I had resentments. Why was I given up for adoption, right? Why wasn't I good enough? But anyway, in this last 5 years during my recovery, I was looking for my parents. I did the 23andMe thing. I think everything happens for a reason, and everything happens in the appropriate time. And as I had no relationship with my natural family, while I was in rehab, I got an email from what it turned out to be my half-sister. It's just freaking crazy. I've been looking for so long. And as it turns out, she's in Los Angeles, and ended up, after I got out of rehab, we connected. And it's just funny how my recovery story includes, getting in touch with my half-sister, who I now have a strong relationship with since she's in Southern California with me. And I've now built a relationship with a niece and nephew that have almost become like grandchildren to me, because my half-sister's 15 years younger than I am. But mine is connection, because right out of my earliest stages, it was caffeine, and that just leads you into an all-night thing that actually becomes a worse devil, because now you're straight up in the middle of the night craving booze and you can't go to sleep, or craving connection when there is none and everyone's asleep. And the sugar does the same thing with the chocolate and the candy. So my healthy was connection. So mine was the phone numbers and texting. And so what I found is the disruption of thought, that if I could just text the guy, calling works great. If you're brave enough, call them. But if you're early in it, even just texting someone to see what's going on. For me, touching base with someone a couple times through a text, or certain people, especially if you're getting antsy, get your mind off of it. And someone responded back that you just thought of them, it means the world of them that you're thinking of them. And you're basically just getting out of your own head. To me, it's connection. Then after that, candy. Comes up all the time. I mean, I'm not far enough along. Maybe it'll be less frequent or go away altogether. I don't know. It hasn't for me. Just Sunday, I met a friend, and she and I watched the 49er game up at Hermosa Beach, and we went to a sports bar type setting, and there's drinking all around us. But she's in the program too, and we drank non-alcoholic. I drank Diet Pepsi, but and she got like a Moscow Mule without the mule, right? She just had the ginger beer, the lime, but there was aspects of times in my head that while I was sitting there, it's like, wouldn't that be nice? Or no one's going to know. Or I bet I can just do one. And I got there half hour before her just to get a seat. And I thought, maybe I could. Yeah, I just have to dismiss it. I have to just tell it. So either I tell myself, I either say, fuck you, devil, or, fuck you, John, or, that's just not going to happen. People say play the tape forward. And that's true. All you have to do is think for a second how I know in me that I can't do one. I've never done one. Never. I just never have. There's never been an occasion that I've done one.
What is sobriety?
Second half of my life, man. It's just being alive. It's finally being the John that I always thought I was going to be and didn't know it.
Right on, man. I really appreciate you. Yeah, thanks for doing
Appreciate
this.
you too, kid.
Anything else you felt like you wanted to share?
There's many cats out there who have made their life calling about this. So definitely ask for help. It's there. So fucking
do it. Right on, man. Well, thank you
Thanks,
so
kid.
much again. Thanks, dude. I really appreciate you.
Hi, I'm Kenny Hill with Recovery Hill. My intention here is to show the diversity of sobriety. How one finds themselves clawing from bottom is as nuanced as their journey to bottom. And their situation and recovery has the potential to be highly relatable to somebody who is watching. Therefore, I offer the interviewees to have total freedom to express whatever has worked for them, whatever has helped them sustain sobriety. That said, here at the end of the interview, I want to make a quick request so that it wasn't to take away from the interview itself. This request is that you like and share the video. You can subscribe if you want, that's up to you, but at least like and share it so that the content can get to as many people as possible. There is a great capacity and potential for the story you just watched to be able to help out somebody else to begin their story of recovery.